Logan Jacobs wasn't the type to make a scene. Quiet, tall, and a former firefighter turned home renovator, he believed in fixing what was broken and leaving what couldn't be saved. In Ridgewood Estates, despite its fancy name, clean sidewalks, and perfectly trimmed shrubs was broken beyond repair. It started subtly. A letter taped to his door about the shade of brown he'd chosen for his shutters. Then the trash bin complaint left out for 10 minutes too long after pickup. The final straw. A citation for unauthorized use of wind chimes. Apparently, his calming bamboo chimes disrupted the aesthetic unity of the cold-day-sack. At first, Logan tried to laugh it off. He figured the HOA board was just bored. But then came the threats of fines, followed by surprise compliance checks while he was at work. Each note came signed by the same name, Karen Bishop, HOA President. She lived 4 doors down and had a knack for staring too long and smiling too little. Logan didn't do drama, but even he had a line. So when he found a quiet 4-acre property, half a mile outside Ridgewood's jurisdiction, a slice of land surrounded by woods, silence, and no HOA, he acted fast. The house needed work, but it had a workshop, a deep porch, and most importantly, no one telling him where his garbage bins should sleep. He didn't even tell the neighbors he was leaving. On a cloudy Friday morning, he loaded up his truck, filled a moving van with everything he owned, and drove out without a wave. It felt like exhaling after months underwater. By Sunday, he was drinking coffee on his back porch, watching birds dart through the trees. His phone didn't ring. No letters were taped to his door. For the first time in almost a year, he felt peace. But peace, it turned out, had a short lease. On Tuesday, a knock broke the quiet. A man in a delivery uniform stood on his porch, holding a flat white envelope. Certified mail, he said. Logan signed, confused. He slid a blade along the seal and pulled out a stack of neatly printed papers. At the top, in bold font, notice of civil action, Ridgewood HOA v. Logan Jacobs. He blinked, scrolled through the contents. Karen was suing him, not for unpaid dues he was up to date, not for damage he'd passed every inspection. She was suing him for unauthorized withdrawal from an active homeowner's covenant and evasion of easement-based responsibility. Logan laughed, out loud. He actually laughed. Was that even real? He set the packet down and shook his head. But there, on the last page, it hit him. This wasn't a prank. There was a court date, a real judge, a real case number. Karen had filed a lawsuit accusing him of escaping HOA governance without proper release, and her evidence, a faded copy of an old neighborhood expansion map from the 1990s, supposedly showing that his new property technically overlapped with Ridgewood's extended jurisdiction zone. Logan had never even heard of such a thing. He flipped back to the beginning of the packet. Attached were screenshots of his property listing, zoning codes with certain lines highlighted in yellow, and a grainy Google Earth image with a red arrow pointed at his shed. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he set the packet down, stood up, and grabbed his keys. Before he left Ridgewood, he thought he was just moving on. Now, it looked like Karen wasn't letting go that easy. What Logan didn't know then was that this map, the one Karen had staked her entire case on, was about to become her undoing. But first, he'd need help from a friend with the right set of eyes. And a long memory. Logan sat in his truck outside a dusty building with faded signage that read County Archives, Records Division. His fingers tapped the steering wheel as if warming up for battle. The lawsuit still sat in the passenger seat, sealed in the same envelope it arrived in, untouched since his first read-through, but it might as well have been a stick of dynamite. Inside, the archive smelled like old paper and stale air. The front desk clerk gave him a half-smile before handing him a request form. Logan scribbled fast: zoning records, Ridgewood Estates, boundary filings, anything with expansion maps between 1990 and 2010. The clerk blinked. That's a big net. Looking for anything specific? Logan didn't look up. I'm looking for whatever Karen didn't want me to find. Hours passed. File boxes stacked. Zoning decisions, HOA applications, county denials, hand-drawn maps, half of them crumpled or poorly copied. But none of them showed Ridgewood's boundaries reaching his new property line. Not one. Still, he knew he needed someone who could read between the legal lines. That night, Logan pulled into a cluttered garage on the far edge of town. There, surrounded by topographic maps and rolled blueprints, stood Derek Clay, a zoning investigator turned independent researcher. Derek had once been a county clerk with an attitude and a memory for details most men would have thrown out with the recycling. When Logan walked in, Derek was feeding fries to a parrot on his shoulder and watching a conspiracy doc on a cracked TV. You're late? Derek grinned, which means something's on fire. What is it? Logan dropped the HOA lawsuit on Derek's desk with a thud. You ever heard of someone getting sued for leaving an HOA? Logan asked. Derek didn't answer. He flipped open the packet, adjusted his reading glasses, and let out a slow whistle. She's using Annex Map 1 for B. Seriously, you know it. Derek leaned back, amused. Yeah, I buried it. Logan raised an eyebrow. Derek continued. Karen's husband tried to extend Ridgewood's jurisdiction in 2009, filed it late, got denied. then tried again the next year and fudged signatures. County slapped them down and told them never to file it again. He dug into a battered cabinet and pulled out a dusty folder with red tape wrapped around it. Here it is. Rejected, stamped, denied, dead. Logan stared at the date. It matched the year Karen's so-called map was filed, but hers had no rejection stamp, no county signature, just hand-drawn lot lines, and a big star marked authority zone. She never mentioned the denial in her suit, Logan said quietly. Derek snorted. Of course not. She doctored it. This map's a ghost, no legal status. But she bet on you not knowing the difference. Karen's lawsuit wasn't built on facts, it was built on hope. Hope that Logan wouldn't question a dusty map or ask the right friend. But the thing about ghosts, eventually, someone brings a flashlight, they scanned the denial letter, notarized it, and printed 3 copies. Derek slid one into a manila folder. You show this to the judge, Derek said, and she wished she stayed in her cul-de-sac, but Logan wasn't done yet. Something was still bothering him. The map Karen submitted included GPS coordinates and updated lot dimensions. The original version Derek showed him didn't. That meant Karen had altered the map again. She'd updated it with new data to match Logan's land. Logan's jaw tightened. She's not just lying, he said. She's tracking me. Derek leaned in. Then you're gonna need more than a file folder. You need proof, she crossed. That line? Logan nodded. The courthouse hearing was still 10 days away. He had time. He just had to catch Karen red-handed. Before Karen could speak in court, Logan would make sure the judge saw the truth first. But getting evidence meant waiting and watching. And what Logan caught next would tip the scales for good. Logan wasn't sleeping much. Every time the wind creaked through the trees, he sat up, convinced it was someone or something out on his land. The woods around his new property had always been a comfort, a kind of barrier between him and the madness he'd left behind. But now, it felt like the line between freedom and invasion was being tested. The 6th night after his visit with Derek Logan installed a motion sensor near the edge of his property, facing the access trail that ran from the old ridge fence line. He had a gut feeling that Karen wasn't done watching him, and Karen never liked to lose dot. At 2:47 a.m., the alert buzzed on his phone. Logan jolted awake, grabbed a jacket, and stepped quietly out onto the porch. The woods were dark, but the infrared camera was clear. Someone was moving near the back fence slowly, methodically. A flashlight clicked on briefly, revealing a reflective vest in what looked like a tablet or GPS device. The figure stooped, drove something into the dirt, then stepped off carefully, counting paces like a human tape measure. Logan didn't wait. He stepped down off the porch with a quiet determination, his boots soft on the dirt. As he drew closer, he saw the figure better, a man in his 30s. Slim build, black cap, equipment pouch clipped to his belt. He looked professional, but Logan had learned better than to trust appearances. Hey, Logan called out. The man froze. Slowly he turned. Oh, hey there, he stammered. Didn't mean to startle anyone. I'm city zoning. Checking markers. Logan crossed his arms. Got ID. The man patted his vest, looked down, then pretended to reach into a pocket. Must have left it in the truck. Logan took a step forward. Which department? County. Infrastructure, Survey Division. There is no Survey Division, Logan replied. You're not with zoning. I already called them this week. No active inspections on my land. The man looked nervous now. He adjusted the strap on his pouch. Look, I'm just doing my job. You should call your HOA president. She'll explain everything. Funny, Logan said coldly. She doesn't speak for this land anymore. The man turned without another word and disappeared into the dark trees. Logan followed just long enough to spot the taillights of a gray SUV vanish down the unmarked access road. When morning came, Logan walked the perimeter and found 4 survey stakes pounded into the soil. Each one had colored tape wrapped around the top. He photographed them, yanked them from the ground, and tossed them into his workshop. Karen had crossed a new line this time, a literal one. Sending a fake inspector to gather data for court wasn't just underhanded, it was criminal. Logan called Derek, who showed up before noon, steaming cup of coffee in hand. He inspected the stakes, examined the tape, and made a few calls of his own. They're using private land survey tools, Derek said. It's what firms use to generate digital overlays for boundary claims. You don't do this unless you're planning to weaponize property lines. Logan sat down hard on the porch steps. She's trying to rig the map for the judge. Or fabricate new lines to show overlap with HOA territory, Derek added. If she gets them entered into evidence before you object, you're fighting uphill. But Derek had a plan. He called in a friend from the city engineering office, who owed him a favor. By the end of the day, they had a notarized affidavit stating no public surveys were authorized, along with a time-stamped email log from zoning officials confirming the same. And just for good measure, Logan pulled the security footage off his motion camera, grainy, but clear enough to identify the man's movements. The GPS unit, and the false claim of being a city worker. Karen wasn't trying to win by the rules. She was counting on no one checking her playbook. But Logan wasn't just checking, he was building a case of his own. The next move wouldn't happen on land. It would happen in court, and Karen had no idea that every step she took closer was a step toward collapse. By the following Monday, Logan's land felt different. The air was heavier. The trees that once brought peace now felt like silent witnesses to something creeping closer. He started keeping the curtains drawn and locking the gate at the edge of his gravel drive. What once felt like distance from the HOA now felt like the front line. Karen was escalating. A second certified letter arrived, thicker than the last. Inside were updated filings for the upcoming hearing, including a new affidavit claiming that Logan's property structure violates Covenant 6.4, referencing perimeter integration with shared Ridgewood Greenbelt space. Logan scoffed. The so-called Greenbelt she referenced was a ditch, half full of standing water and candy wrappers. More alarming was a page labeled Updated Map Overlay, now complete with topographical detail and exact GPS coordinates that matched the fake surveyor's stakes to the inch. She had used the data, illegally gathered and now submitted into official court filings. Logan knew then. This wasn't about HOA control anymore. Karen wasn't protecting community standards. She was protecting her legacy, and she was willing to falsify anything to do it. Logan paced his porch, gripping the envelope. He called Derek, who answered on the second ring. She submitted the stake data. There was a pause. So she's going all in, Derek muttered. All right then, it's time to break out the ace. They met that evening in Derek's garage, where old zoning files were stacked like bricks. Derek's contact from the city engineering department had tracked down the original submission forms from Karen's husband's failed expansion attempt, but this time, they found something new. A document buried deep in the county's denial package, a letter addressed to Karen directly. In it, the board had clearly stated the expansion boundary was never authorized, and any future attempt without council approval would be considered fraudulent misuse of municipal maps. It was signed, stamped, and dated 10 years ago. That was Danelle. She ignored this letter, Derek said, holding it like gold. This alone gets her kicked off the board. But combined with the fake survey, the judge might toss the entire HOA standing. Still, Logan wasn't celebrating. He knew Karen. She wasn't the kind to go quiet just because she was losing. She'd double down until something cracked or someone did. He didn't have to wait long. 3 nights before the court hearing, Logan heard tires crunching over gravel around 1:15 a.m. He slipped on a hoodie, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out quietly. A small sedan idled just outside his gate. The driver's window was open, and inside sat Karen. She didn't get out. She didn't even flinch. Just sat there, staring straight ahead, her hands gripping the wheel tight. Logan didn't speak. Neither did she. After a long 30 seconds, she put the car in reverse and backed slowly down the road without turning her lights on. Karen didn't come to argue. She came to rattle the cage, to remind Logan she was still watching. The next morning, Logan filed a trespassing complaint with the county. He didn't expect anything to come from it, but it was now on record. Then he spent the rest of the day assembling his response for court. The fraudulent map and the certified denial letter, the affidavit from the zoning department, the motion camera, footage of the fake surveyor. And Derek's expert witness statement. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten. He just built the quiet kind of case that cracks loud lies wide open. What Karen didn't realize was that Logan wasn't just defending his land. He was defending every neighbor she'd steamrolled, every silent family she'd find, every porch light she'd tried to snuff out. The hearing was only days away, and Karen was about to walk into a courtroom where the walls wouldn't protect her anymore. The morning of the hearing was gray and dry, the kind of day that didn't hint at anything out of place. But Logan could feel it in his chest, a storm waiting behind the courthouse doors. He pulled into the county lot 30 minutes early, driving his dusty Chevy pickup with 2 file folders on the passenger seat and Derek riding, shotgun and a blazer that hadn't been worn since his cousin's wedding. They said little. They didn't have to dot by the time Logan stepped inside. Karen was already there. She stood near the clerk's desk in a bright white suit, heels clicking with sharp precision, clipboard tucked against her chest like a shield. A group of Ridgewood board members surrounded her, all dressed like they were headed to brunch instead of court. One of them, Steve Daniels, head of community development, kept rehearsing lines under his breath while nervously adjusting his tie. Logan walked past without making eye contact. Karen didn't look at him either. She was too busy handing thick packets to each board member and whispering instructions like a stage director. Karen didn't walk into court to win with truth. She came to win with performance. Her folder was thick, her voice was polished, and her smirk said she'd already written the ending. The courtroom was smaller than expected, just 2 long tables and a raised bench. A court reporter sat up in the corner. The bailiff called for order. Logan sat down calmly, placing his folders in front of him with quiet precision. Karen's lawyer, a polished man in an expensive gray suit, adjusted his papers and nodded to the judge like they were old friends. Then, she stood. Karen walked confidently to the center, cleared her throat, and launched into her opening remarks before the judge even asked for them. Your Honor, this case is about a resident who believes he can abandon the very foundation of Ridgewood, a community built on cooperation and standards. Mr. Jacobs. knowingly violated community expansion agreements, and removed himself from collective obligations. This is not just a zoning matter, this is about integrity. The judge nodded slowly, motioning for her to submit her evidence. Karen's lawyer approached the bench, placing several binders down. Each was tabbed, color-coded, and packed with maps, digital overlays, satellite images, legal citations, and the forged boundary map Derek and Logan had traced to a rejected file. Logan didn't speak. He simply opened his folder and waited. Karen had made one mistake. She thought the show would carry her through. She thought Logan had come unarmed. But every curtain has a drop. The judge looked at Logan. Do you have a response to the evidence? Logan nodded once. Yes, Your Honor. But first I'd like to present a document from the County Zoning Board, dated March 12, 2009. He rose and walked to the bench. One page, one official seal, a clean copy of the expansion denial letter. Karen had hidden. The judge took it, eyebrows rising as he read silently. Then Logan added two more items. A notarized affidavit from the zoning board chair, and still images from his surveillance camera showing the fake surveyor. I also have a signed witness statement confirming no authorized surveys were requested or approved on my property, and a copy of an official complaint filed for unauthorized entry. There was silence. Karen stood, clearly unprepared for this shift in tone. Objection, Your Honor. This is mischaracterization. The judge raised a hand. You'll get your turn. Sit down. For the first time since this began, voice cracked. Her hands fidgeted against the sides of her suit. She wasn't in her cul-de-sac anymore. She was on unfamiliar ground and the lights were brighter here. The judge flipped back and forth between the binder and Logan's documents. Then he leaned forward, speaking evenly. Let me be clear, if this map was altered and submitted without county approval, this entire claim may be dismissed on grounds of false representation, and we may be looking at a countermotion for legal misconduct. Karen didn't sit. She couldn't. Her eyes darted between her lawyer, her board members, and Logan. Logan, who hadn't said more than 5 sentences, but whose quiet folder had just ripped the roof off her entire case. The courtroom had gone still. No one shuffled papers. No one whispered. Even Karen's entourage, previously eager and upright, had fallen into an awkward silence as the judge quietly flipped through Logan's folder for the 3rd time. His finger paused on the county seal. Then, slowly, he turned the page to the affidavit from the zoning board chair. He adjusted his glasses, leaned back, and gave a long, heavy exhale. Karen was still standing, rigid, eyes wide. Her lawyer leaned in to whisper, but she batted him away with a subtle flick of her hand. Logan, meanwhile, sat motionless at the defense table, arms crossed. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He just watched. Karen had walked into this courtroom thinking it would be a performance. She forgot that truth doesn't need rehearsals. It just needs a spotlight. The judge leaned forward. Double quotes, Mrs. Bishop. He began, his tone cool and steady. Please explain why this court received a zoning map as central evidence. One that not only lacks proper certification but directly contradicts this county-issued denial letter from 2009. Karen's voice cracked on the first word. That map reflects Ridgewood's intent to maintain community boundaries. The expansion, though initially denied, was later reconsidered under informal jurisdiction. Informal jurisdiction, the judge repeated, raising a brow. Is that a legal term you'd like to define for the court? Her mouth opened, then closed. He turned to her attorney. Counselor. The lawyer cleared his throat, acknowledged there may have been procedural inconsistencies in map formatting. However, formatting, the judge interrupted, doesn't explain a complete fabrication of property lines and the unauthorized submission of zoning overlays, derived from an illegal private survey. There it was. The judge's voice was calm, but it echoed with weight. Even the court reporter paused for half a second before catching up. Karen finally sat. Not because she wanted to, but because her legs couldn't support the weight anymore. The folder Logan handed over hadn't just exposed a mistake. It had detonated the very foundation Karen had built. Her case and shattered the myth of her authority. But the judge wasn't done. There's also the matter of a trespassing complaint filed against your office, he said, tapping Logan's security footage stills, with accompanying evidence that individuals posing as county workers entered private land without permission. Karen's lawyer objected weakly, calling the footage circumstantial. The judge didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, he asked the clerk to bring the hearing to formal review. I see no viable cause to continue this complaint, he stated. This court finds that the Ridgewood Homeowners Association, represented by Karen Bishop, submitted deliberately misleading documentation and acted without legal standing. Karen's mouth fell open again. This case, the judge concluded, is dismissed in its entirety. Logan blinked once, then slowly exhaled. Across the aisle, one of the HOA board members, Steve Daniels, let out an audible, "Oh, thank God," before shrinking back as Karen shot him a death glare. But the damage was already done. In one morning, the woman who spent years micromanaging mailbox paint and trash schedules was stripped of her legal footing by a folder of quiet facts. And Logan? He hadn't even raised his voice. As people stood to leave, Karen remained frozen. Her lawyer gathered his files and quietly stepped away, avoiding her gaze. Even the board members she once led were now whispering among themselves, none of them offering her help. Not anymore. Logan grabbed his folder, nodded politely to the judge, and walked out without looking back. Derek was waiting for him outside on the courthouse steps, leaning against the pillar with a grin and 2 coffees in hand. So? He asked. Logan raised the folder. Judge didn't even need the second half. Derek handed him a coffee. Still tastes better when it's earned. They stood there in silence for a while, letting the crisp wind push past them as the doors creaked open, and the once powerful president of Ridgewood HOA stepped out. Alone. No clipboard, no entourage, no words. Karen came to win a case, but she walked away with something else, a courtroom full of people who finally saw who she really was. Ridgewood was silent for 3 days after the hearing. No HOA newsletters arrived, no warning slips were taped to doors. The community Facebook page normally buzzing with Karen's reminders and reprimands went dark. It was as if someone had pulled the plug on the neighborhood's control center, and without her grip, everything just paused. Inside Logan's new workshop, the folder from court now sat on a shelf next to a jar of old nails. He didn't feel victorious. He felt finished. Some fights don't end with cheers. They end with quiet. When the loudest person in the room finally loses their voice, what's left behind isn't a celebration at space. But the silence didn't last. On Thursday afternoon, Logan's phone buzzed. It was Derek. You might want to turn on the Ridgewood livestream, he said. Logan frowned, confused. There's a livestream. There is now. He opened his laptop. Sure enough, someone was broadcasting the emergency HOA board meeting from a folding phone set in the back of Ridgewood's community center. Karen wasn't at the podium. Instead, Steve Daniels stood awkwardly before a few dozen residents, reading from a printed sheet, his voice tight. As of this morning, Karen Bishop has formally resigned from her position as HOA president, effective immediately. There were murmurs, but no gasps. Just a strange mix of relief and confusion. Steve continued. The board will be undergoing a temporary audit and reorganization due to recent legal challenges. Logan clicked the volume down and leaned back. Karen didn't fall with a bang. She faded without a fight. But what Logan didn't know, what no one knew yet, was why. That answer came 2 days later. A knock at his workshop door startled him. Logan wiped his hands on a rag and opened it, expecting Derek or maybe a delivery. Instead, it was Lena Bishop, Karen's daughter. They had only spoken once, briefly, at a community BBQ months ago. She looked tired, not angry, not embarrassed, just worn down. Can I talk to you? She asked quietly. Logan nodded and stepped aside. They sat on opposite stools in the center of the shop. Lena stared at the concrete for a long time before speaking. She wasn't always like this, she said. The HOA stuff, the control, that wasn't her when I was growing up. Logan waited. She started changing after my dad died, Lena went on. He left her with a mess financially, legally. His name was on every bad filing Ridgewood ever made, including that expansion map, but she wouldn't let it go. She spent years trying to make it valid. Said if she could fix it, she could fix everything he ruined. Logan watched her closely. She didn't sue you because of your grass, Lena added. She sued you because your house, your land, made that map impossible to defend. There it was. Karen wasn't just trying to win a lawsuit. She was trying to rewrite her husband's legacy. And when Logan moved outside the lines, he didn't just escape the HOA. He exposed the fiction she built around her grief. Lena stood to leave. I'm not asking you to forgive her, she said, but I thought you deserved to know. Logan nodded once. Thanks for telling me, she hesitated. For what it's worth, she's been quiet, really quiet. He watched her walk back to her car and drive away without another word. That night, Logan sat by the fire pit behind his new house, staring at the glowing logs. The wind stirred the trees gently. His daughter called from inside, asking what they were having for dinner. He smiled and called back, surprise me. Logan had won, not with rage, not with vengeance, but with patience and truth. What Karen built out of fear and paperwork crumbled the moment she brought it into the light. But Ridgewood wasn't done with her. Not yet, because the board still had records to review, and what they found next would put Karen in front of a much bigger judge. 3 weeks after the courtroom dust settled, Ridgewood started cleaning house. Without Karen's voice filling inboxes and mailboxes, the neighborhood began to reshape itself. Homeowners who once lived in fear of inspection slips now gathered freely, trimming bushes how they liked, flying unapproved flags, even hosting Friday barbecues without noise warnings. But behind the scenes, something else was brewing. The interim HOA board had quietly requested a full audit, not just of Karen's legal filings, but of Ridgewood's HOA bank accounts, expansion applications, and enforcement history. And what they uncovered didn't just embarrass the old leadership, it exposed them by midday prole. 2 Ridgewood board members had resigned. The third, Steve Daniels, stepped forward publicly and confirmed it. Karen had been using HOA funds to pay for her legal filings against Logan without membership approval. Her lawsuit wasn't just petty, it was funded by the very neighbors she claimed to protect. and now, they wanted it back. Logan heard the news not from the board, not from a letter, but from the sheriff's deputy, who came to his door one evening carrying a sealed envelope. "Just, official notice," the deputy said. "She's under review. Might be some hearings down the line." Inside the envelope were two things: a county notice confirming Karen Bishop had been formally reported for fraudulent misrepresentation and misuse of community funds, and a civil restitution claim, now opened by Ridgewood's own board, demanding she repay nearly $38,000 in unauthorized legal and administrative expenses. She wasn't just gone from power, she was now liable. Logan sat on his porch, holding the envelope like it was made of glass. He didn't smile, not because he wasn't satisfied, but because he knew this wasn't revenge. This was justice. And justice didn't need applause. Logan never wanted to fight. He wanted to live. But some battles find you anyway. And when they do, all you can do is stand, speak, and stay true. A week later, Logan got a letter handwritten, uneven, and unsigned. The handwriting was unmistakably Karen's. "I thought I was fixing what he broke, but I became worse than him. You were right to leave. I was wrong to follow." There was no return address, no apology. Just those 3 sentences and a folded copy of the HOA denial letter from 2009, this time with her own initials scribbled at the bottom. Logan didn't show it to anyone. He burned it in the fire pit that same night. Some things didn't need to be framed. They needed to disappear. Derek stopped by the next evening with a 6-pack and a smile. "You hear? Ridgewood's letting people repaint their mailboxes now. No application required." Logan smirked. Revolution. In the end, Logan didn't just win a case. He helped break a system designed to keep people small and scared. And while Karen's name faded from the bylaws, her shadow remained a reminder of what happens when power forgets its purpose. Spring came early that year, the woods filled with green again. Logan started building a fence around the backfield, not to keep people out, but to mark where his land began, where no forms, fines, or phantom maps could reach him again. His daughter painted a sign and nailed it to the GATEPOST. It read, "Free Zone, no Karens allowed," with the apostrophe in the wrong place and a little cartoon chicken drawn underneath. Logan left it there permanently. If you've ever dealt with an HOA bully or felt trapped by rules designed to serve the few instead of the many, remember, Logan, quiet, can be powerful. Patience can be deadly. And sometimes, the strongest case in the room is sealed in a single envelope.